Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/Entitled People. Today we have one more set of great revenge stories. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. Tear down our fence? Okay, game on. Back when I was younger, maybe 10-ish, we lived in the backwoods of Texas, along a sort of highway that connected our town to commerce. We lived next to a very grumpy old woman who owned two very beautiful boxers. She'd let these big dogs out when I and my 5-year-old brother were on the back porch, meaning my protective father brought us inside because the dogs often got through our fence and he wasn't risking having us get hurt. About 2 years before we leave said house, she gets her son to tear down a fence that was a foot onto our land because her yard isn't big enough for her dogs. She'd apparently sold most of her acreage of land to the neighbors on her other side, and that we were harassing her by keeping her dogs out of our yard where they like to play. So, my dad, who's known very well around town due to his job and being a great person all around, called animal control, specifically a buddy of his who worked in it. They went to the old lady's house, asked for her permit because we were still technically in a county that forbade owning a boxer/pit/etc. without permission. She didn't have any, so animal control immediately took the good boys away. Turns out they were also starving and sick. Instead of putting them down, my dad struck a deal with the pound, letting him pay for treatment, drops in the bucket TBH, and get a certification for our house to own them. Within a month, those two doggos were back in our yard with the biggest smiles. Turns out once you feed a good dog, they stop growling and looking at you like a 4-course meal. They refused to go near her yard. They'd even go full guard doggo when she stepped onto our land. So Dad built a fence again, this time wrought iron with spikes on top, so when her idiot son once again was told to remove them, he was promptly removed at dog point from our property. Eventually gave the dogs to a family member in a different state because we moved and couldn't take them with. But we visited often. Wish I could find photos, but we had a house fire about 7 years ago and it pretty much wiped out all of our old stuff. And our second story. Try to fool me and not pay me? Not this fool. I live in Costa Rica. Beautiful country, no doubt. However, in my area of business, it's not uncommon for a customer to close his store, take away his goods, and neglect paying his debts. After a while, open another store under a relative's name and try to start fresh, keeping a low profile. This is fueled by very weak laws, difficult and lengthy legal procedures, lots of people and companies offering the same line of products, and the silent acceptance of that kind of behavior. Quite sad, but that's not the point of this post. This is what happened a few years ago. This customer, Mr. J, had a nice store in Guanacaste. He had several invoices pending for payment, and suddenly he declared bankruptcy. He just decided he wouldn't pay his debts. I had the pleasure of calling him several times only to have his phone numbers mysteriously disconnected. He became unreachable. Should I decide to go try to find him in his hometown, it'd be a solid 4-hour drive just to get there, and another 4 hours driving back home. After a few weeks, his account was declared uncollectible. However, during the time I was trying to collect that money, a new store opens around Mr. J's town. They start doing business with us, but that account landed on another coworker's desk. Being a new customer, it's customary to ask front payment for the first 3 deliveries, and so it was done. First and second shipments go, quite small ones, but everything seems normal. However, by the time the third shipment, massive compared to the previous 2, was about to be released, I just happened to receive a phone call from the customer. While I was speaking with the person who called me, I just heard him call Mr. J and ask him a question. My F you up sense woke up immediately. I managed to smoothly ask my interlocutor about Mr. J, and he just slipped this new store was his. We finished the shipment details, the money was paid up front, and here comes the good part. The third shipment went from 7 big boxes full of goods to just 1 small box with a couple of things and an envelope containing Mr. J's unpaid invoices and a statement detailing how his payment was applied to his old account and the remaining funds applied to his current order. After almost 3 months of trying to reach Mr. J, I was pleased to receive Mr. J's phone call 3 days later. He had always been an a-hole who yelled at people for no reason. and this time was not the exception. I just listened to his exotic words with a grin on my face. At the end, he threatened to sue me for my actions. I'm still waiting to be summoned by the court. I feel like he tried to go Michael Scott and probably just yelled in his store, "I declare bankruptcy!" And our next story. High on the Hogs, a story of pro-family revenge. So one of my brothers is adopted and is amazing. He didn't get anything handed to him in life, and he's seriously one of the hardest working people I know. Just as he was starting his own family, he had even more financial burden due to some medical problems. Still, somehow, he managed to build half a house on some land my dad sold him. He used the equity in that to get a second loan and finish it. He had to fight the bank for that even. Time goes on, and he begins to do really well. So he sells the first house he built at a profit and buys some land. Like 175 acres in the Midwest. He lives in a rural area. He likes to hunt and does some farming on the land, but the house that was there when he bought it isn't ideal, despite some major improvements and renovation. So he builds a third house and puts the house up for sale. He keeps the land around the house for hunting. This is important later. This is when one of his envious family members asks if he and his wife would consider selling them the house. They can only qualify for something like half of what it's worth, but my brother's a fairly generous guy and agrees to sell the house to them at a rather hefty discount since they're family. I'm sure he felt some of their pain as well. He'd had his own difficulty back when he was starting out. The bank agrees to loan them the money. They can't go wrong. It's for way less than the property's worth, and the deal is done. A few short months go by. He's driving by the property and spots a for sale sign. He stops in, and the husband explains that there were some things about the house they weren't happy with, so they were planning on selling it and buying a house more in town or something, etc. My brother explains that they got a sweet deal only because they were family and that he'd appreciate them selling the house back to him for what he sold it to them for. The husband basically closes the door on that, and my brother leaves. And he thinks about it. I'm 100% certain that the family members understood that they were getting a good deal because they were family, and he was happier selling it to them with the understanding that they weren't going to take advantage of his good graces. This is a guy, by the way, that manages big projects. He's a really fair guy. The stuff he does in construction, probably half of you have driven over. Big bridges that go over rivers like the Mississippi, for example. He's used to solving hard problems. This one isn't that hard. The next day, he drives out with some fence in the back of his truck, and the family members in the house wake up to some fence posts being driven into the ground. The husband comes out. "What's going on?" he asks. "Just putting up some hog fence on my property. Don't worry, it's all on my land. I'll just go around your house here and put in a gate so you can get in and out." The husband's a bit perplexed. "You're bringing in pigs?" And my brother was seriously set to do it, too. He had about 100 lined up from a farmer down the road. The husband goes back into the house. A few minutes of discussion occur. The next day, they all meet at the bank, and the deed is transferred back to my brother. And he didn't even have to deploy the hogs. And our next story is auto repair shop shut down. There was a small mechanic shop a few blocks away from where I lived, ran by a man who I'll call P. My mom had been going to this mechanic for as long as I can remember. I'd say at least 15 years. I was 17 when this went down and was looking at getting my first car. I would have considered P to be a family friend at this point, so when he heard about me looking for a car, he offered to gift me a car he had sitting on his lot for a while. Around this time, my mom was wanting to fix up her 1989 hard-body Nissan pickup truck, valuable due to its dependability, as it had just been sitting around for about a year. I don't remember the exact timeline, but it'd be safe to say my mom brought in the truck and he offered to gift me the car around the same time. For a few months, he always had an excuse as to why the truck wasn't ready yet or why he hasn't gifted me the car yet. When it came to the car, it was always something like, "The car has just been sitting around for a long time and needs work done on it. I'll get to it when I can." And when it came to my mom's truck, it was, "I've been really busy around the shop, so I haven't got to it yet," or "I'm waiting on parts to come in." Since we trusted P, we didn't think much about it since we knew his shop had a very good reputation in the area and was always busy. Also, he was giving me a car for free, so I wasn't going to keep pushing him for something he doesn't have to do. I would estimate this started around November, and it wasn't until around February or so that we felt it starting to get out of hand. My mom started contacting him at least once a week to see when the truck would be ready, but was given an excuse each time. At this time, I knew I wasn't going to get a car from him anymore, but I wanted my mom to get her truck back. I researched who to make a complaint to if you're having an issue with an auto shop. In California, there's a department called the Bureau of Automotive Repair, BAR, who licenses and governs all auto repair facilities. In the process of making a complaint, I had to look up the auto shop's license. This is when I landed on a gold mine. His license had expired the previous September, so I threw the report out the window for now and decided to confront him. Now, I've never been confrontational. When I must confront someone and get heated, I start having anxiety attacks with a shaking, high-pitched voice and the whole 9 yards. So imagine a 17-year-old with a high-pitched, shaky voice screaming at this guy to give my mom her car back. He kind of brushed me off and I didn't get anywhere, but as I was walking out, I said to him something along the lines of, "Have fun with the bar when they find out you don't have a license," and walked out. The next thing I did was report him to the bar for the whole situation, including him still operating when he shouldn't be. Over the next week, my mom was communicating with the person assigned to the case, and within a couple of weeks, we were marching back into P's shop to pick up the truck. After a very awkward situation where my mom paid for the services done and I was standing behind her still trying to act like I'm in control, we left with the truck and we're good to go. I don't really know the exact timeline of when everything happened after this, but I know I passed the shop a couple of months later and saw that it was closed. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.